Good afternoon and welcome to a workshop meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. It is January 25th, 2023 and 2 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time. This will be both a physical meeting and a virtual meeting. Some members of the city staff and consultants are participating via teleconference. Guests that are included in staff presentations will be excused from the Ring Central meeting at the conclusion of the agenda item as appropriate. Today's meeting may be viewed live on YouTube, Facebook, and available for viewing after the meeting on cable channel 10, HD 1090. Public comment is not normally taken at workshop meetings, although the council may allow or request public participation. And with that, I'll note that we have, looks to me like a full council today. Yes, good. Everybody's here, although we don't take roll at these meetings. Appreciate you all being able to make it. So our first item is under Parks and Recreation on our agenda, Marina Trends and Financial Analysis. For that, we will have a presentation today from actually a report from Paul Sorensen. Paul is the, yes.
I was just say, we have other people from the Marine Advisory. I would like to move that council accept comments from them after the presentation. There's a second to it. You see, we have a motion to approve the council to allow public comment, but we have 1, 2, 3 members that I think it would be invited if it passes.
So we have a motion to allow for public comment from the three other participants here at this time. Yes, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
We may need to be prepared to do that for other agenda items as well, but I will certainly second that.
So now we have a motion and a second to accept, at this point in time, I think it is those participating from the Marina Advisory Committee. I think that's the motion. Yeah, there's nothing else at this point on the agenda. We have motion and second. Any input or questions about that? All in favor signify by raising your right hand. Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. For that, we'll move on. Mr. Sorensen, as I was saying, is the founder of BST Associates, focusing on waterfront development, including marina market and financial analysis and business planning. Paul Sorensen is also the vice chair of the Northwest Marine Trade Association, which promotes boating through the Seattle Boat Show and the Marina Boatyard Conference, and lobbying on issues relevant to the recreational boating industry. I'll also say, before I turn this to our harbor master, Chris Sublett, that I have attended a couple of meetings where Mr. Sorensen has already met with us in administration. The first meeting, I wanted to size him up a little bit, and quite frankly, Paul soon was able to convince me that he knows far more about marinas than most, and he actually, as a neighbor, lives on Fidalgo Island. But you ask him a question about any marina in Puget Sound, and he's probably got a pretty good answer to it. So I'm very impressed with Mr. Sorensen. Also, as you all know, that the marina's in my front yard as far as where I live, so it's obviously another reason that it's very important to me. So with all that said, I'll turn at this point to our harbor master, Chris Sublett, and I think you're going to talk a little more about Paul in the presentation. Chris, thanks.
Mayor and city councilors, I just want to provide a little background information on our efforts thus far regarding the business plan. We did contract with BST to write this business plan for us, and we did it for 2 reasons. One, it's a best practice, and secondly, it is part of our DNR lease that we currently have with DNR. It's really unknown when our last business plan was written. However, in 2007, there was a marina redevelopment guide that was written, and that had some aspects of a business plan in it, and I believe that Mr. Sorensen was heavily involved in that as well. As the mayor said, Mr. Sorensen is the founder of BST Associates. He has over 25 years of writing business plans and doing economic studies for marinas and boatyards. He's recently written a business plan or provided economic studies for Des Moines, Everett, LeConner, Cap Sandy, and many others. He also does these for other states as well, so he's not just limited to Washington. He's going to give us a presentation that is just fantastic. It's going to be an eye-opener, and we'll be ready to answer any questions you may have afterwards. It should also be noted that these presentations were vetted through the Marine Advisory Committee at the last 4 meetings, October, November, December, and January. And as the mayor said, we do have members of the committee with us. We have Mr. Ken Hewitt, who's the chairman, and Mr. Byron Scooby, who is the second longest tenant in the marina. So he has a ton of marina experience as well. So at this point, I'd just like to invite Mr. Sorensen to the podium, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris and Mr. Mayor. Council members, I'd like to share our presentation for you right now. Chris talked about the scope. The reason for the study really was to do some long-range planning. The marina was built about 50 years ago. It needs some help, and so the plan was to do this, identify marina options, discuss it with the tenants. We've had a lot of meetings with the MAC and other partners, the county, Department of Natural Resources. And the scope included looking to some extent on existing conditions. We conducted a lot of outreach, reviewed marina operations, evaluated the financial performance, and then developed some options to consider and recommended some next steps. Our goal with this really wasn't to provide you with a slam dunk business plan that you could just sign. You've got to do some thinking about what are the best options for the city and for the marina right now. So in terms of looking at existing conditions, the marina has some difficulties. There's dredging needed in the basin and also in the channel. Moffett Nicholas has been hired right now to evaluate the dredging options and the cost. And then also a part of that, I think they're going to be doing a marina reconfiguration, looking at what sorts of slips there should be, the lengths and how many they can fit in. Looking at the docks themselves, you've got an awful lot of damage over the years to them and also to the power systems. So these are things that all need to be addressed. In terms of outreach, I mentioned we met, I think, 4 times with the Marina Advisory Committee and with Marina staff. We also sent out a survey to 576 former and current tenants and got a 43% response rate. We had 249 people respond, and that's just an excellent response rate. What we found from them, we asked them what they like about the Oak Harbor Marina, and number one was staff is doing a great job. Chris and his group, real kudos to them. It was consistent throughout all of the comments. This was the highest number of responses, 107. Location was the next most important thing that they liked about the Oak Harbor Marina, and it was twofold. First of all, it's close to home, and then it's close to where they want to go. So those things were very important. Also, third was quiet, clean, and safe. One of the comments down there, it's a small community where most people know each other and are willing to help each other. It's clean, quiet, and safe was very important to a lot of boaters. Price obviously comes into this. The rates are a little lower than we'd like to see them from a financial standpoint, but it's a very competitive price from the tenant's perspective. And then the facilities, docks, and Wi-Fi was number 5. We had a number of other responses, but this establishes that there's a lot of things that the people do like about the Oak Harbor Marina. Dislikes about the Oak Harbor Marina, we sent surveys to small boats, people that own small boats as well as people that own longer boats. And the number one comment was the boat launch ramp and dock need some work. The ramp does need to have something done to it. It's difficult to launch and the dock has some damage, but that's being taken, it's being addressed and will be undertaken. Number 2, overall marina rebuild, kind of building on the pictures that we saw earlier, that there's a lot that needs to be done. 3rd, water depth, and this was much more prominent among the people that had the bigger boats, and that's a problem more for them. Lack of amenities in the uplands, stores, and a boatyard was number 4, and overall dock condition. In terms of improvements needed specifically, again, dock repair and replacement, boat launch ramp, and dock improvements. Those kind of tied for number 1 and number 2. Power system improvements, water depth, and then several people, the 5th response was, it's good as it is right now. Just leave it alone. Other comments? Most folks thought they'd already addressed it, so none was number 1. Again, kudos to staff was number 2. Price, launch ramp, and water depth. And this comment that's underneath the box there doesn't need a lot of changes. Please don't make it so fancy that the rates become prohibitive. This is something that we hear frequently in marinas, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in terms of what you might be able to do about that. And then also staff does a great job. That came through throughout all of the discussions. Just a little bit about background on what's happened with boating. You remember the run-up that we had in 2003 through 2007, just before the Great Recession. There were a lot of purchases being made of RVs and boats and travel and a variety of other things. When the recession hit in 2008, boating was one of the slower industries to recover. It wasn't until 2011 where it bottomed out. So we were bringing in about 500 new boats, and these are boats in Washington State, 26 feet and over, and that's kind of the main group that we look at for wet moorage marinas. And it fell down to around 112 or 120, somewhere around there during that period, 2011 and 2012. Since then, it's grown and it's reached 400. This was in 2020. It's grown a little bit more in 21 and 22. In fact, COVID was a strong growth time period for boating. But the point here is that boat sales are discretionary. They increase with a good economy and they decrease with a difficult economy. And that's something that we're going to see, those fluctuations through time. Looking at the long term in Washington State, we look here at boats again that are 26 and over foot. And the fleet size has remained right at around 25,000 boats during this time period from 2000 to 2020. What we see is that boat sales per capita, though, have declined from 4 per 1,000 persons to 3.2. So what's made up for that decline in per capita consumption is a growth in the population rate. So that fleet has remained fairly stable, and per capita ownership is down, but that's been resolved by growth in population. Now, Island County kind of mirrors what's happened in Washington State as well. The thing that's really changed, particularly during the last few years, is that the growth in the number of boat sales and the fleet for longer boats is growing at a more rapid rate than for smaller boats. So you can see the top line shows the number of registered boats by a resident county here in Island County. It's been fairly volatile, up and down a little bit, but a little less than 300 boats. The 31 to 40 foot boats have been increasing, again with a little bit of fluctuation. But the average annual growth rate has been fastest for the 41 to 50 and the over 50 foot boats. So this again is something to think about when you think about rebuilding the marina. You want to build it not for the base that was there 50 years ago when you built this marina, but what you think they might be 20 years from now. The other thing that we looked at was where your tenants come from. And we like to do this in order to define the primary, secondary, and tertiary markets. It's really like a real estate, a retail business, an office building, even an industrial park. You've got a primary, secondary, and tertiary market. For Oak Harbor, since so much of it is local, the size of the secondary and tertiary markets are smaller. And that has to do really with your distance off the I-5 corridor, being able to draw from the more populated counties. 50% roughly of the tenants are from Oak Harbor. The rest are from Coopville and from other places on the island. So you're a local marina, not a regional marina, and that impacts what you can do in terms of rates, the pressures that you'll experience with that. We had just done some work, as the mayor mentioned, in Des Moines, and in that case, 25% of the tenants live in the city. The great majority live in Seattle. And in that part of King County, there really aren't very many other marinas until you get into Shoal Bay, Elliott Bay, those areas, if you want saltwater boating. But also quite a few here from King County, from Skagit County, Snohomish, and other Washington and other US and foreign. But my point here is that looking at your market also makes us think that you've got an issue in your ability to raise rates. We think you need to do that, but there's some limits on how much you can raise them. And that then again impacts what the financial situation is with the marina. Now, in terms of looking at marina comparisons, this shows the number of slips or the percentage of slips for several marinas based upon the length of the slip. You can see that Oak Harbor and Des Moines, the current Des Moines configuration, and Everett have a real high preponderance of the 20 to 29 foot slips. And all of these marinas were built 40, 50 years ago, so it was really built for that, that tenant base. If you turn to Cap Santee and Anacortes Marina, which is just south of Cap Santee in Skagit Bay, Edmonds as well, you have more in the 30 to 39 and more in the 40 to 49 and the 50 to 59 foot spaces. So having a large share of wet moorage for small boats really did make sense a long time ago, but it really doesn't right now. Now, by that, I don't mean that you can't provide services for the small boaters. Whenever we've done these kinds of concepts, you have to find a way to take care of them. And what Des Moines is considering right now is building dry stack storage where they can reduce the number of small slips and then give those people a place to put their boat. Yeah, I think you need to think about a concept like that as well. So for marinas in Puget Sound, there have been very few new marinas built basically since 2000. The Port of Bremerton built the Bremerton Marina, and the Port of Everett built the North Marina. Those were right around 2008, 2009, so they were coming in right as the recession was hitting. And it took them quite a bit of time to get back up to the occupancy that they needed. The focus in wet moorage really is redeveloping existing marinas and finding a way to make a slip configuration that meets the biggest portion of your tenant base. The other piece of the puzzle for moorage is dry storage. This is where most of the growth has happened. I'm sure you're familiar with Twin Bridges on the Swinomish Channel. Seaview North, the boatyard in Bellingham, is now planning a dry stack. There's dry stack operations at Bayside in Everett, the Foss Waterway, in Lake Union, Lake Washington, and a number of other places. And then at Anacortes, they have such a large portion of property that's marine industrial. They have a lot of single tier storage, must have 1,000 or more boats. And that's tied together not only with moorage, but also with sales, used and new boats, and repair work. So our findings for the market are that the number of boats in Island County have been growing, especially the longer boats. Oak Harbor's got a large share of small slips. Smaller boats are trailerable, which reduces annual occupancy and revenue in the smaller slips. It's kind of jumping to the financial piece, but that's a key point here. And that you're a local market. Other marinas, for the most part, draw from a more regional market. We still expect few new marinas to be built. And the focus will be on redevelopment of existing marinas and also construction of new dry storage. So let's turn to the financial. This graph shows operating revenues, and you can see moorage is the big chunk of the bar there in the yellow. And I'd like to note that it's about 2/3 of your overall operating revenues. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that you can see what happened when the dredging tax came in 2011. It wasn't, it dropped down in 2012, 13, 14. It wasn't until 15 where it got to the same point, not including any impacts of inflation. So there was a push out of the marina by people when that dredging fee was imposed. Moorage rates are low relative to competitors and should be increased, particularly for longer slips. But standing back and looking at how to solve the financial situation from the marina, there's real limitations on how much of it can come from raising rates. It's a part of the puzzle, but it's not the entire one. Now, here's a couple of charts that show the comparison of moorage. Oak Harbor here is the red line on the left side. That shows what your rates are for the different lengths of boat for open moorage. And the blue line is the average of the marinas that we compared to, and the 90th percentile was the yellow. Now, in the case of Des Moines, when we were looking at their financial plan, we assumed that the city would increase to the average right now, and after they rebuilt, they would switch to the 90% percentile. I don't think that works for you. I think that's going to raise rates and create some vacancy problems that you would have. However, you are 15 to 30% low compared to the average rates, depending upon the length of the slip. And usually this gets worse as the boat length gets longer. And 25 to 45% low at the 90th percentile. Similar kind of pattern for covered moorage. But in this case, there really aren't very many comps for covered moorage that's 24 or 28 feet. There just aren't very many of them. We had Des Moines in this, and that's one of the competitors, but that's going to be changing over time with them. It's a similar situation where you're 5 to 30% low relative to the average of other marinas, and 5 to 37% low to the 90th percentile. So there is some room to raise rates, and I think you should look at that. Now, standing back and looking just at your operating and non-operating revenues and operating and non-operating expenses, and this excludes debt service, you can see that from the red bars on the left side there show your expenses. They increased from around 900,000 up to about $1.5 million. Now, some of that was related to dredging, and some of it was related to indirect expenses and other things. But on average, the revenues have been increasing over time from 2009 to 2021 at a lower rate than expenses. And that changes from year to year, but it's kind of a bad situation to be in when you're looking at increasing your net revenue. And the net income on the right side shows that a few years it was negative, and it has exceeded a few years $300,000. But over that entire time period, you only averaged $188,000 from 2009 to 2021. Now, this is important because you're going to need debt service. It's going to be one of the major reasons to look at improving, or the major sources to look at improving the condition of the marina. These are preliminary cost estimates based on our experience. The dredging basin right now is $4.5 million. That's what the city was expecting it to be. Moffett Nickel is going to do some work that will take a look at that. We threw in just an estimate for the channel. We really don't know how many cubic yards you have to dredge there. The redeveloped marina, and we're assuming a marina of 200 to 300 slips, would be $16 to $24 million. And this is based on the average cost that we found in Des Moines, which was right around $80,000 per slip. And then a new breakwater. Again, this is something that we don't have a good estimate on, but based on what some of the other ones are, we put in 5 million. So looks like you're looking at, it's just ballpark numbers here, $30 to $40 million that you'll need to spend. These estimates really need to be refined before you can move forward with your future decisions. But the key from my perspective is that dredging and replacing the breakwater do not generate revenue, but they account for 38 to 50% of the costs. Now, in other marinas, when we're looking at that, the Port of Edmonds, for example, is looking at having to rebuild their seawall. The Port of Bremerton at Port Orchard needs to rebuild their breakwater. All of those costs are typically not funded by what the net operating revenues are from the marina. They're from other sources of funding. City of Des Moines the same way. They've rebuilt their seawall and have some more to do on that and some dredging, and that won't be a part of the marina operation paying for that. So I think that the cost to rebuild the marina should also be compared to the cost of removing the marina, so that you really have a full sense on what your options are and what's the best choice to make. And this is something that we heard from MAC members as well, that it's not just as easy from looking at either do it or don't do it. It's not a costless decision to remove it. So we would recommend that Moffett Nickel maybe look at that as well. Now, looking at that kind of cost to rebuild the marina, it's looking at debt service of about $1.5 million to $2 million per year. This is assuming 4% over 30 years. And I remind you that the net revenue that you had available for debt service is $188,000. However, once you pay the existing dredging off, that's gonna increase a little bit. It's still not enough to cover that, though. Rate increases and cost savings are needed, but they aren't sufficient to meet the funding requirement. And the current rate strategy isn't working, resulting in far less than an 80% goal. The rate structure right now is identify the average of competitive marinas and then establish 80% of that. I think that needs to be relooked as well. But the key here, I think, is that finance will likely require city participation and extensive use of grants. And the problem with that is there's few direct grants for recreational marinas, but there may be creative solutions to this and looking at how other grants may be obtained. Now, turning to Des Moines for a bit, just to show you how they're planning to redevelop. They're doing it in phases. And this shows after all the phases what will happen. You can see they've got 65% right now of their slips are 20 to 29. We reduced that virtually to just a few. And this has to do with when you're actually taking a look at laying the slips out, how many spaces really are available that might be small ones like that. Focusing on the 30 to 39, the 40 to 49, and the 50 to 59. They're in a different situation you are in that they have a very constrained basin. But my key here too is that they're eliminating covered moorage. They're planning dry stack storage to meet the needs of the smaller boats. And in number of wet slips, they'll be going from a current number of about 730 slips down to about 510. So this is kind of like a real estate deal where longer boats are wider, so they take up more area on the water plane. And actually what happens is that the number of leasable linear feet is about the same with a lot of slips, many small ones, compared to fewer slips, many long ones. Here is the redevelopment plan for Des Moines, and you can see the existing shows most of their moorage is covered. Those will all be removed, but you can see when, especially when you get into phase 2, you can see that between H and G dock, you'll have to take those 2 slips out, or those 2 floats out, and it will be replaced with 1 float. So this is what happens when you start looking at building longer and longer slips, that you wind up with fewer of them. And this was a key decision and a difficult thing for them to do as well, but they decided the best plan was to convert to all open slips and also to focus on the longer slips. Now, standing back and looking at what you might consider, one is to think about it as a park with a marina. And Maidenbower Bay Park is a good example in Bellevue, where they have they've envisioned a redevelopment of the area as a grand pedestrian boulevard connecting the lake to downtown and the East Side Rail Corridor. So they want to provide access from the different community. And they're also providing access to different kinds of boating, hand-powered kayaks, and a variety of other kinds of ways of using the water. Next to the curved new dock there, those 3 floats to the right of it are also owned by the city of Bellevue. They're looking at removing one of those and improving the other 2. The problem they have in Bellevue is parking. There's very little down there. And so they're looking for creative ways to manage that, which a lot of the more urban areas are doing as well. But looking at this as an opportunity to look at that asset as something that provides a lot of services, and some of it is marina and some of it meets needs of the rest of the community. Is, I think, a good way to look at it. Port Orchard Marina is owned by the Port of Bremerton. They have to replace the breakwater. It's going to cost them about $15.7 million to do that. They have been awarded a $1.2 million grant by the Recreation and Conservation Organization, Washington State. And they're also looking at creative other sources of grant funding. One of them is transportation funds linked to the Kitsap Ferry. Right now, the Kitsap County ferry comes to the breakwater for its overnight service and to allow the crew to get back home. So they're part of that transportation network, and there are some funds they're hoping to get there. Another one is economic development. We've seen a lot of money coming in now to grants and opportunities for folks or for communities where there are a lot of jobs associated with the water activities. In Anacortes, for example, T-Dock is being redeveloped, and it has a very substantial volume of crab and seafood that comes across it, about $15 million a year, and 2 other vendors that add about another $2 million or so in terms of revenue that they derive from being able to use that dock. So that opens you up to the Port Industrial Development Planning Groups grants and some other grants like that from the Maritime Administration. I know there aren't very many here now, but it's something that you might consider looking at. The MAC has brought up looking at possibly working with the mussel farmers in Coopville. They need to clean their facilities, their pens out. You do have some fishing that's occurring right now, then potentially the boatyard and other activities that might occur with it. So create more economic development that might allow you to get some of those economic development grants. And other sources, and particularly for those, maybe something in the park and recreation, which Bellevue used quite extensively. One other way that some of the cities are looking at is a public-private partnership. And the city of Seattle is an example of this. They own Leschi and Lakewood marinas down by Seward Park in Lake Washington. And you can see the top slide there, the photo, how poor the condition was of this marina, and it just kind of deteriorated. So the city became more concerned about the cost of redevelopment and decided to enter into a public-private partnership. And redevelopment funding included some money from the city, RCO grants, and that 1.2 million is about the max you can get from them. And then they made a lease with a private partner that was responsible for the remaining capital costs and the O&M costs. The city receives a percentage of the gross revenue, and the term of this contract is, it has to be a longer term one, 20 years plus 2 10-year options. I think this may be being negotiated. City of Tacoma did a similar kind of operation. These two examples are with the Elliott Bay Marine Group that used to run the Elliott Bay Marina. They're running the City of Seattle and the City of Tacoma's marinas. So these are all potential examples, and I think, we need to get more into the details of this. Our options really boil down to those, though: a larger community plan, a new vision for the harbor, access to grant funding for trails, infrastructure, economic development, dedicate lease revenues from adjacent upland development to marina and related improvements. This is something that we're seeing particularly in port operations. For example, the Port of La Conner right now is looking at solving some of their dredging cost expenses by dedicating some lease revenue from upland development to that. Or a public-private partnership where you work with a marina operator slash developer, or you do a condominium operation where you have an operator that provides it. You see this sometimes with yacht clubs. It shifts the capital spending and O&M costs to the private party. It reduces the revenue, but it also reduces the risk to the city. So those are the overall options, and our recommendations are developing a new vision for the marina. As part of the dredging plan that Moffett Nichols working on right now, prepare a harbor reconfiguration plan, redefine the size and shape of the DNR lease area, refine the demand, cost estimates, and phasing, and then a financial plan. Increase mortgage revenues, reduce operating costs, whatever lease opportunities and grant opportunities are available, and then evaluate the rebuild option with the remove option. So this is a lot to chew, and we've been through a lot, but I'd like to open it up for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Sorensen. I've got one observation that I know I already asked you this question, but back in your slides when you talked about the marina comparisons, and we show that we obviously, in this comparison chart, still have a lot of boats that are under 20 feet in our marina.
Yes.
And I noted and asked you about Anacortes. It looks like the Anacortes has 0 boats of that size, according to this chart.
They have a launch, and there's lots of boat ramps around, so that community's pretty well taken by that.
Interesting. And even Des Moines, same sort of thing there.
Same thing. Yeah, they even were a higher percentage of 20 to 29-foot slips than a lot of other marinas. But they're shifting out of that right now. They're going to plan on dry stack storage to solve that problem.
So my little 13-foot Boston whaler is still going to be okay on the boat ramp. I don't expect to get a spot in the marina, though.
Yeah, the boat ramp.
Okay. And the one other thing that you talked about right at the end there was the actual footprint of what we lease from the state for tidelands. And it sounds like your observation is we could negotiate something different with them, providing we have a use for those tidelands. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, that would take some out-of-the-box thinking, most certainly, and that's the direction we actually have to go to rebuild the marina, reconfigure it, and do all the things that we need to do to bring it up to speed, is not think the way we've thought, but think the way that's outside of the norm, and leverage those opportunities that we've never leveraged before and explore all the options that may be out there. So yeah, that's part of it.
Good. As we move along, I want to point out the city purchased a piece of property on Bay Shore not long ago, and within the last month we closed on that sale. It was my observation during that time that the tidelands on the other side of Bay Shore were complicated, but not really. The city of Oak Harbor owns the entire tideland area on the other side of Bay Shore, That was what I found at the end of that purchase. And I guess my point here is we have a lot of tidelands that we own. We just don't happen to own the tidelands that are under our marina as it currently exists today. So as we negotiate with the state, I think we perhaps could at least remind them of that we have a lot of other tidelands that we have, and I don't know whether they trade tidelands, but I guess if we're thinking out of the box, that we could put it all on the table. So having said that, I'll turn to council now. Councilor Wiesner?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that presentation, Paul. And before I ask some questions, I just want to let you know where I stand. I am a huge proponent for the reconfiguration of our marina and having a physical connection to our downtown as an economic development driver. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and including the enlargement of our harbor, moving that breakwater out to the Flintstone Park area where we had originally looked at putting a pier, creating a breakwater that people can walk out on, and making Oak Harbor a true harbor. So with that said, you didn't dive into it much in your presentation, but what complications and what's the history or the track record within our state of forming a port?
Well, we talked about that internally. There hasn't been a new port formed since the early 90s. It requires a vote of the people. You can also petition to have your area merged in with an existing port. That's another option. I think that maybe some of those have happened since 1990, but it requires, if it's a vote, say, to go with Coupeville, it would be requiring a vote of the people in the Coupeville port, as well as all the people that would be absorbed then into the new portion of that district.
Yeah, and obviously, there's some advantages, there. I mean, I think Coupeville's done a heck of a job, with the limited revenues they've had, and accessing grants to keep a lot of aged wood up and operating, and obviously the forming of a new port, as you'd stated, is tough, and I guess where I'm coming from is I think if that vision was big enough, right? If people were to see, what tremendous change we could actually make to our community with the relocation of that marina and the connection to our downtown, that might be a possibility too, and I just don't want that to, fade off into the sunset. I mean, obviously, it would be up to the people. It is a taxing district, but the advantage to ports obviously is it creates that long-term revenue source, which we can easily bond to do some pretty big things, and that would be certainly a big thing for this community. So, again, thanks for the presentation. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So would this be an opportunity to move the marina?
It could be potentially an opportunity to move the marina. Again, everything's on the table at this point, whether it's moving to our tidelands that we own, reconfiguring the marina where they're currently out, working out a new deal with DNR, all of that. So that is something that we're going to look at, or could look at. As part of our dredging project, and we're having the kickoff meeting for our dredging project next week, we are going to ask them, we're actually going to come to the council hopefully in February to get a contract amendment to have Moffett Nichols study the best opportunity and the best reconfiguration for our marina, and moving it over to Flintstone Park in that area where we do own the tidelines is certainly something that we'll be talking about.
Because if we could have that tied, like you were saying, more to our downtown, where it's accessible and people are coming in, going shopping, that would be a huge advantage. It would also be really nice to see some of those private personal watercraft, paddle boats, kayaks, that type of rental where people that don't have a boat can still go down and participate with the water. I think that there's a huge opportunity with the private-public partnerships in this scenario, because, I mean, that's what they do. That's what they do. That's their business, is operate marinas and have all the different programs and functions that generate revenue. And I think that I didn't see that on the final recommendations, but I think that's something that we should look at, in my opinion. How many slips do we have total down there?
We have about 420.
Okay. And our reorganization would be 200 to 300?
Yes, out of that 420, about 50% of those are 28 feet or less. So the theory would be that we would reduce the amount of small slips we have and gain bigger slips in those areas.
So we're gonna have to come up with a way to attract those larger boats as well, because right now, I mean, just seeing some of the public comments, we have a waiting list for the small boats, and we have some open slips for the large boats. So we'll have to have a plan to
Yeah.
fill those as well.
Yeah, in the Puget Sound area, there's a huge backlog in waiting list of larger boats. And by larger boats, I mean 36 and up. If you go to every marina and look at what they're full on, it's typically that 36, 40, 45, 50, 60-foot range. The challenge, if you drive into Anacortes or look at Dagmars, there's a lot of big boats stored there. And a lot of people do that because they choose to, but a lot of people are doing that because there's simply nowhere else to put them. We receive calls daily for 40 and above, 36 and above in that range.
Okay.
And we're full.
Good to know. Yeah, we definitely have to do something with the marina. I would beg you guys to entertain the public-private partnerships. I think that could be a huge advantage to our city and something to look at. Thank you.
Councilor Munns. Thank you, Councilor Evans.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, were you here when we kind of got in a tiff with DNR?
I had just started right at the tail end of that, but I do remember following that in the newspaper.
Well, basically, the council pushed back and
Yes.
said, then we'll just move the marina downtown where you don't own it. And that's when, I don't know, sometime after that, I think you were on the council then, that,
I certainly was. I was in Olympia. I certainly was.
so we called them on it and they backed off for a while and then Mary Margaret was able to get a reprieve. But I'm nervous about negotiating with DNR unless we have a big stick over here. Because, I mean, we were paying up to what, $75,000 a year? And that's out of the tenants. That's out of paying for their slips. We had to pay DNR, which appeared, to my personal opinion, their slush fund for any little projects that they wanted. Us in Des Moines, because we're not a port. I think Oak Harbor at least twice, maybe 3 times, has tried to become a port, and it never went because no one wants other taxes. So, but I love the idea of pushing it out to downtown, the breakwater and stuff. Also, for the dredging, if we're reconfiguring, don't we have to move docks out of the way so that it's clean dredge? I mean, I know there's a lot of planning into it, but no, I'm all in favor. We've needed to redo. We need larger restrooms with nice showers. We need really good Wi-Fi. We know some people live on their boat and count on it to work from their boat. And so, no, this is good. I know it's going to take a while, but it's very encouraging, and it's an asset. Most cities don't have a harbor to use or to enhance their city. So thank you very much for the presentation. And Mayor, thank you for your good memory on what we've done before.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, $40 million. That's not a number that's going to fit within the city's budget now or down the road. I think we all know that. With the treatment plant, you know, we have a capital ask into the state legislature for, $20 million in assistance. And I think the biggest reason that comes into play is the average taxpayer only has one bank account, one checkbook, if you will. That said, and don't misunderstand what I'm saying here, the marina is incredibly vital to Oak Harbor, to Oak Harbor's economy, to Oak Harbor's park system, to Oak Harbor as a whole. It really is. We have an amazing finance director. We have an amazing new grants administrator. Got a super awesome new park and rec director and a new economic development coordinator. I think it is a very good thing that we're putting this plan together so we know what to ask for. And I do, whether that's a state grant or a federal grant, I think we all know this isn't going to happen overnight, and this is something that has been going on for a while. But this is very important to Oak Harbor's future. We'll have to figure out how we're going to pay for it. And an option that I would like to see looked at is the public-private partnership as well. And hopefully it can be more than a marina, a marina and a park, like the one we see in there. And an economic driver, you look at what Anacortes has with their marina, or, at the Port of Skagit over at the airport. They really, you don't have to look very far to see how much these things can contribute. So thank you for this, and look forward to seeing what the plan becomes.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm wondering if any of our Marina Advisory Board or otherwise attendees have any public comment on this issue before we keep going with council stuff.
I drew the short straw. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I made a couple of notes during the presentation.
So Ken, could you
I'm sorry.
give us your name and?
Yeah, Ken Hewlett, reside on Scenic Heights here in
Thank you.
Oak Harbor. And I've been on the Marine Advisory Committee for about 12 or 14 years, something like that. And been a boater my entire life, which is a long time. Just a couple of comments. We're talking about several things at once here. We have immediate dredging needs so that the facility that we have can function as a marina, because it's on its way to becoming just a mud flat very rapidly. Now, if you're an advocate of the theories of global warming, we can just wait until the sea levels rise and we don't have a problem anymore. That seems unrealistic to me and doesn't solve our short-term problems, frankly. One of the things that Mr. Sorensen mentioned was off-site improvements and ways to generate additional funds and so forth. We actually have, that's one of the significant constraints we have with the existing facility, is that the city was given that slice of property by the Navy because they no longer used it and so forth. But there's a fence there that we can't cross, even though it's mostly disused, that space. So we have very, very limited areas to do things like dry stack moorage, or have additional rental spaces for people that want to store their boats, or create a business opportunity in something like that. The term dry stack moorage may not be familiar to all of you, but it's like the Twin Bridges Marina. Essentially, they provide a service mostly for smaller boats, but some of them are getting to be quite big now, where it's like a pigeonhole thing, where you rent a space in the air. It might be the third floor of a dry stack storage, and they have a heavy-duty hauling machine, essentially big forklifts that go in and pick it out when you want to use your boat, and they put it in the water for you and get it ready to go. And we don't have any room for that sort of thing unless we get additional space somehow or another. The notion has come up a couple of times, and it's not a bad idea, about utilizing the waterfront in a different way. It's extremely difficult to dredge existing facilities, and I'm just telling you, it's got to be many magnitudes more difficult than that to relocate a marina and so forth. And one of the things that constrains us, like I said about the Navy property, is it takes a great deal of upland space to have a viable marina. I'm talking parking, boat storage, vendors, shipwrights, all that kind of stuff. So when you start talking about moving the marina, if you're going to actually accomplish something, it would probably take all of City Beach Park to support a viable economic marina. Just kind of a footnote. That's about all I need to say. Anyway, the marina is not just for those of us that use it, but it is an extremely important thing for this community. I think we all recognize that. And the funding opportunities are limited, and it always comes down to the dollars. I mean, we've got more ideas than we have dollars. We all know that. And so we would miss the points if we try to micromanage what's done down there versus where the dollars are going to come from to do whatever it is we decide to do. So please focus on the dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Hewlett. Anyone else?
I believe that Mr. Scooby would like to speak as well.
Yeah, I'm Byron Scooby. I live on Penn Cove, just outside of Mill Carver City limits, but I've been a marina tenant for almost the entire existence of the marina. But I'd just like to second what Ken says. It's great to talk about relocating the marina and all of that, but the urgency right now, I think, is the dredging, because without the dredging, the marina could fail in a very short period of time, just because nobody wants to come in there and moor their boats when it's going to be sitting on the bottom for every single low tide. And all these plans about moving the marina and that, even the reconfiguration is something that's going to take years to do. But the dredging is a fairly urgent matter, and we need to come up with a plan to get the marina dredged. I think that's the most significant thing that we have to talk about right now.
Thank you, Mr. Scooby. Yes, Mr. Smith.
Oh, yeah, Brian Smith, Parks and Recreation Director, although I might add that super awesome to the title. We'll see if we can do that. Thank you for that. Yeah, so just to conclude, to tell you sort of next steps. So we're, like Chris mentioned, meeting with Moffett Nichols. We're going over the next few months to really dial down and have some good option plans for how do we do this redesign and redevelopment. We do want to tie it into a whole shoreline renovation from downtown to the marina. You really have an under-leveraged gem with the marina. It's so much potential and opportunity. And I think you all have the vision for it. You just need a little help connecting the dots of how we get there, especially with the financials. So we'll bring back to council, if it's agreeable to council, another work session in a couple of months to talk in detail on how we get there and what those options for each of those solutions are, and see what's viable and what your preference is on how we go forward with that. We are presenting for the mayor to authorize a $9,000 fee study to make sure that we're comparable and competitive in the market with all of our fees, from our methodology for fuel sales, our rates for labor costs, storage, all that kind of stuff. Make sure that we're able to sustain ourselves operationally as well. So if you have any other questions, we will be touching base with council as we go along. I don't like to surprise you guys with anything, so by the time we get to that next work session, I think you'll all have a good idea of the different options we're looking at, especially with some funding solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other council?
I haven't made my
Yes,
comments yet.
go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Hewlett really nailed it when he said we have more ideas than dollars. I've got very few dollars, but I've got a ton of ideas written down here. For those of you wondering what the random picture on the screen is, I asked him to pull this up. This is Fisherman's Wharf in Victoria, BC. And on the left side of the marina there, those little blocks, those are all tiny houses. So on the right, there's boats, and on the left, there are tiny houses. And if anybody hasn't been to Fisherman's Wharf in Victoria, is unfamiliar with it, or Mosquito Bay in Vancouver, BC, I strongly encourage you to do a Google image search for those areas. as long as we are thinking outside the box, I'm thinking that, that dock closest to the shore, closest to the marina office, to the shore there at our marina that's, in 3 feet of water at low tide, I'm thinking that maybe in lieu of dredging that far up, maybe some little floating houses would be a better use of that space if we're going to be eliminating smaller slip area. Those houses in both of those areas are 100% occupied all the time, whether by full-time residents or as VRBOs. There's an entire tourist industry and restaurants and food courts associated with them. People go just to see that area. It's an entire economy in and of itself. I think it's very interesting. So, we could maybe skirt dredging that, save on dredging that one area, because it doesn't matter if the tide is low and they're sitting in the mud, because nobody needs to actually get into the water. It would be economic development, plus it would be housing, and it would be tourism. I think it would tick lots of boxes. So anyway, that's just one of those out of the box things. Thank you, Tim, for pulling that up. I appreciate it. I'm a little concerned about the plan to virtually eliminate slips for less than 30-foot boats. Like we have an entire sailing regatta that's 24s to 28s. It's, and they're out there sailing a couple of times a week, so I'm not sure pulling them in and out of the water that frequently is feasible. There's 12 of them? There's 12 of them. So obviously we need to follow the trends and build bigger slips and get rid of the covered moorage, etc. But I don't want to eliminate the moorage for smaller boats. For the counselors going to the Pentagon, I would be very curious to hear the reaction of Navy officials if you brought up the subject of maybe negotiating for some of that upland area. All of that pavement up there that they've got fenced off that they don't use. We could scoot the parking back, we could build more dry storage, we could put an RV park, we could have, condos, restaurants. There is a major economical potential for all of that area that is just sitting there unused. And if we could do some negotiating with the Navy, either for use or lease or gift of that land, there's so many possibilities, and all of them would be income generating possibilities, every one of them. So it's just criminal that space is being unused and wasted at the moment. So I would be real interested to hear what their reaction is if you were to bring something like that up. I realize that would be a lot of red tape, and it's very difficult to find the person that could make that decision, but it might be worth having a conversation about. I also think that we need to entertain the idea of becoming a port district or establishing a port district, taking the idea to the voters. I realize that people don't want, another taxing district, but that would also give us access to unbelievable amounts of grant funding that as a city we don't have access to. Jack Ng, who owns China City, he just received $1 million grant to put in a restaurant at Everett. I think it's Everett or Edmonds, Everett. And, and he's just a private business guy who wants to build a restaurant. He received $1 million grant to do that. So that's not something that would be possible without the establishment of a port district. So I certainly think that we need to be open to exploring that option. It would give us access to resources that as a city we don't have access to. And I also think that we need to be open to using some city money or general fund money towards some of these marina expenses. The marina was built with a bond, and that bond was paid off, and it's an enterprise fund. It's completely self-contained. So the city has never contributed financially in terms of tax revenue to the marina, but we do see all of the economic benefit. The city gets all of the economic benefit from all of the tourism, all of the events. And so I think that, in terms of its lifetime, I would also be open to the idea of being willing to use a little bit of city money to, some of these one-time projects. Not a lot, but a little bit. I think that needs to be on the table. looking at my list, trying to see if I've hit all of the ideas. Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the question of what would be the cost of abandoning and dismantling the marina. Because if we decide to do nothing and it becomes unusable, how much is it going to cost us to actually remove everything, clean it all up? I mean, we're talking probably tens of millions of dollars, and if we're going to be spending tens of millions of dollars, then we might as well have something usable and income generating for that amount of money. So it's not, I don't think it would be as simple as, oh, well, let's just do nothing, because either option is going to cost a lot of money. And so if we're going to be spending the money anyway, then I certainly would prefer to use that to enhance the jewel of the city versus just abandon it. And I think I hit everything. If I think of anything else, I'll let you know. But I'm really looking forward to cleaning up those numbers a little bit, getting some better estimates, and seeing some more options. And yeah, I think this is going to be a long, hard road, but I'm really excited to see what's possible at the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So just to conclude our first item, I will respond to say that during Matt Arney's time as our base CO, I did send him a letter towards the end of his period of time with us, asking about using some of the Navy property for dry docking boats, and that was denied. But that doesn't mean we should stop asking. So I certainly agree with Mayor Pro Tem. We do plan to make our annual trek to Washington, D.C., and I will, in that regard, represent the Whidbey Island Task Force with our half-day into the Pentagon. And Mr. Oborn has come up with the idea of spending some time before we leave the building with the Corps of Engineers, which I think is a great idea, to just sit down with them and introduce ourselves and get to know them. They certainly know Anacortes, and we intend to do that this year in March. So a lot of great input. I hear you loud and clear. You know, I when I first got on council, I floated the, probably shouldn't use that term. I had an idea that I sat down with Mayor Slowick at the time, and the idea was to move the marina, and I think the price tag at that point was $20 million. We didn't get too far into that conversation before we realized that we didn't have those kind of funds. Mr. Hoffmeyer's pointed out that, you know, 40 million, I'm not sure where that figure came from, but we hear you loud and clear, and I also agree that again, that marina's my front yard. It's really fun in the summertime when it's busy, watching what goes on over there, and it's just it's a great thing for Oak Harbor. Our marina is. We'll work to make it better. So thank you for all of your efforts. I know the Marina Advisory Committee works hard to do just exactly what we ask them, to help with advice and what works. I was surprised to hear that Mr. Scooby was the second longest tenant. Now I'm really curious about who the first longest tenant is. But thank you, Mr. Scooby, for all of your marina fees over the years. My goodness sakes, thank you. And thank you for your hard work, everyone. So with that, we'll move on to our next item on our agenda today, and that falls under finance. We have our city grants administrator, Wendy Horn, has just joined us here for the quarterly update. Wendy?
Good afternoon. Today, I'm going to be giving you just a brief overview of some of our recent grant activity, some things that are coming up in the near future, and then also some considerations that we talk about before we bring anything to council. And I'm going to see if I can do this. Okay. So, I believe that you all were notified that we received both of the TIB grants that we applied for back in August, which is exciting. What you might not be aware of is that the TIB grant for Northeast 7th brings the total amount of funding to $2.1 million in state and federal dollars. So what that does is that offsets the street funds that the city has that can be put towards a different project. The same is true for the West Whidbey Avenue grant. That $485,000 offsets the Transportation Improvement District funds that can be used for other pavement projects. In terms of ARPA, just want to let you know that we've spent about $1 million in 2022. The larger projects are getting underway, and the majority of the smaller projects, equipment purchases and whatnot, have pretty much been completed. Also, you probably are aware that we received the inflow and infiltration project dollars, the $1.95 million that was part of the federal appropriations bill that was signed in December. We have already reached out to Representative Larson's office, and we're figuring out how we're going to secure those funds and start that project. So I also just wanted to share with you that over the last few months, I spent a lot of time researching federal grants. They seem to come up with a new one almost every single week. And for the most part, right now, a lot of them are not going to fill our immediate needs, or we just don't qualify for them at this time. But we keep reviewing them, and we keep looking. We're also keeping an eye out for federal dollars that are going to start flowing through state departments. So Commerce, WashDOT, cybersecurity, broadband, all those are coming through the federal government to the Washington state, who then will turn around, open them up for local awards. So we're keeping an eye out for those. And then there are countywide grants that are coming open this spring. There's the Conservation Futures Fund. You might have seen that article in the Whidbey Times. That just opened. There's also Rural County Economic Development Funds that may be opening. And those are all a few that we'll be looking at to see if we might fit. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is we do have a monthly grant meeting with directors and key staff. We go over all the ARPA projects, see where we're at, and then we also discuss any other potential grant opportunities or any projects for the city that we definitely want to look for funding for. And then the other thing that we have been doing in the last 3 to 4 months is contacting the granting agencies directly. We've been having phone calls, Zoom meetings with a variety of different agencies to see if maybe some of our projects would fit. We've met with the EPA, CURB, Commerce, and the TIB. And an example of how this, what a difference this can make is the fact that I went to a workshop that was held by the TIB this past summer, and I invited the project engineer down to meet Steve Schuler and Alex Warner, since they were new, and he didn't know them, see our projects. So he came down in July, and then he provided some technical assistance to Alex when we were writing the proposals. And I really think that it made a difference when we submitted the proposals to the TIB board, because they were successful. And I think just having those conversations and developing those professional relationships with the different granting agencies, and specifically the grant program managers, will make a difference as we move forward. So as we do move forward with grants, a few things that we think about before we submit anything to the council is, if the grant award isn't going to be as much as the project, are there other sources that we can leverage funding for? Is there a match requirement? If so, how much is it? Where is that going to come from? Is the project going to take longer than the grant allows? If so, how are we going to manage that? Do we have the capacity to meet all the grant requirements? Financially, reporting, even staffing-wise. And then really, what are the reporting requirements? Are they going to be worth it? If you have a $5,000 grant, but you have to report outcomes for another 5 years, you have to take that into consideration. So for the most part, if we can answer all of these questions positively, we generally think that a grant is going to be manageable and it's going to be worth the time, especially if it's going to save the money, or save the city money, leverage other funding sources, and move a project ahead. So, to sum things up, I think the key takeaway for today is that when you see a grant proposal on the agenda, you can be assured that staff have done their homework and that they're bringing you a proposal that's going to have a strong opportunity to get funded. Thank you.
So thank you, Wendy. Before I turn to council for questions, I wanted to remind you that during the last presentation, Mr. Sorensen spoke about potential economic development grants regarding the marina. And remind, probably don't have to remind you, but we've had continuing negotiations with our neighbor down there, and that includes money for economic development from the county, actually, to help us in those negotiations.
Right.
Those are still ongoing, and in fact, probably will come to the table before long. And if that ends like it could, we might be in the business for looking for more economic development grants as it pertains to that. So I just wanted to remind you and thank you for everything that you are doing already.
Yep.
And that you will be doing in the future. So I'll turn to council. Yes, Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. Wendy, I really liked it, the FaceTime, inviting them to come meet some of our new employees, and they get to know them, so there's a trust, and they can see that we're very eager to have that knowledge, and I'm sure you are right, that it really helped. Have you found, since you've been in this position or position at other places, that if you are able to obtain a small grant, but it's a grant that the next time you apply, it's easier and you have more luck continuing getting grants along that line?
Yeah, I think developing the relationships with the grant program managers, you know, especially if you can show that you can manage a grant well, that you can meet all of the requirements, that you can finish it on time, and that you're being fiscally responsible, the next time around, you know, maybe they won't have as many questions. Of course, the projects have to match what the grant is, but yeah, I think it definitely makes a difference.
Thank you for what you're doing, and appreciate it.
Councilor Hoffmeyer.
I really love these quarterly updates that you give. You know, really love the fact that the TIB grants were able to make it in the newspaper, for instance. I think one of the biggest reasons that I'm glad that we have these quarterly updates, and you know, that little bit of press there, if you will, it's so the public can see that you are as amazing as we all know you are. It had you know, it had been a goal of council for a while to have someone in the position that you're in, a skilled and experienced person in the position that you're in. I don't think anybody on council thought that we could find somebody as skilled as you are at this. So
Thank you.
the fact that your position's already paying dividends, it's very important to the community moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Boy. Yes, Mr. Oborn.
Yeah, just to add to this, I just really want to appreciate Wendy's, and also we do this as a team here and meet together and discuss things and vet them. So she gave you a good example of that, and in the pro cons there, I think the goal here going in when we created this position is to really up our game, and I think we're doing that. I think we're functioning as one team. Mayor mentioned different departments, different divisions have needs, and we're kind of balancing that together and addressing that, and continue to work on that. A lot of great opportunity here with federal funding, a lot more to come with possible requests for SIDS and other kinds of studies that help us get grant funding. We did that safety grant here, and then just more discussion and more opportunities coming as we as we look at grants and look at the opportunity we have. And we're kind of monitoring, the county's looking at a consultant on their side, and so we're kind of monitoring and looking at that option on a federal consultant. I think we've looked at it in the past, so just a lot of things we're evaluating and moving forward. And I just thank all the staff, including Wendy Horn, who worked together as a team and really up our game and really helping us secure grants. I mean, we hadn't secured grants, TIB grants, in 10 years. We thought we'd get one, and we ended up getting two. So I think we certainly have a lot of opportunity to get additional funding here, and we're certainly going to make an effort at it.
Thank you, Mr. Oborn. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next item on our agenda, which falls under Legal Department, discussion considering adoption of Council Code of Ethics and Conduct. And for that, I believe we have our City Attorney, Hillary Evans. Welcome, Hillary.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is a topic we've spoken about a few times now, and I was last given direction to give you a couple of examples. We're here to talk about a council code of ethics and whether or not you want one, and if you want one, how would you like it? I provided you two examples that I thought really exemplified the categories of information you might want to address in two different ways to do it. So you'll see that the City of Kirkland used a code of ethics in their municipal code, whereas the City of Vancouver adopted a standalone policy that affected City Council and the City Manager's office. You can choose to do this either way, or you can choose to do this not at all. You can include any of these categories of information that I've sort of presented to you, or none at all. And I'd really just like to open it up to discussion and conversation about whether or not you think this is necessary, a good use of our time, and direct me or not to make a draft for you of a code of ethics if that's what you'd so choose.
Thank you, Hillary. Turn to council now for input or questions. Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, I think for me, and this is a theme that I will, repeat on many topics, whether it be land zoning or you name it. I think, I think the state of Washington, has a pretty good set of laws in place, pretty restrictive state. So with land use, or, here we're talking about council code of ethics. Very rarely will I favor being more restrictive than the state laws already are. So personally, I would say, I think this council is doing a very good job of regulating itself, and I don't know that it would be the best use of time.
Thank you, Councilor Hoffmeyer. Anyone else? Anything? Yes, Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. I would be open to at least look at it. I know if you're on the AWC board or committee, every year there's two different forms. One is, I guess, code of ethics, and it also your work outside of the board. Are there any conflicts that with decisions that AWC makes? And that's all the cities in the state. Also your spouse or close relative. On the joint tourism, I gathered and we came up with a code of ethics because there seemed to be some clashes of members on it that could make a profit by what the tourism board did because they had property where they wanted. So maybe something that doesn't have to be real elaborate, but I would at least be open. You're right. Council does a pretty good job of controlling themselves, but maybe not. I don't know. As the city grows, maybe it would be more important, but at least look at it, some ideas. I mean, there's no harm in looking. I don't think we have to have it immediately, but I mean, even nonprofits here in town, there are agreements that you say, I will not profit from what this nonprofit is doing or collecting money for. So I'm just open. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Munns. Anyone else? Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I guess I'm going to agree with both of you. You know, when it comes to the ethics itself, I agree with Councilmember Hoffmeyer that I think the state has a pretty good guidelines for elected officials, ethics, you know, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. We do, of course, annual reporting to the state, you know, so it's very clear what, you know, business interests we've got, where income's coming from, et cetera. But I think the piece that the city has been missing is, you know, what happens in the event of the filing of an ethics complaint. And I think that's the part we're kind of missing. You know, what does that process look like? Who runs that process? So I guess, you know, and that's kind of the second half of this what Kirkland document that you supplied to us, you know, that I was just reading. You know, the first half kind of is a recap of, you know, everything that the state requires, and then it's got some redundancy in there in the fact that people for, you know, other than council, for other boards and positions have to file, you know, some sort of a statement involving, you know, income, a public disclosure statement similar to what we do for the state. That's kind of an interesting concept that, you know, we do have some, you know, boards and et cetera, and I don't know that we really understand some of the relationships of some of those people on the boards with, you know, business entities within the community, and that may be something that, you know, we're missing the boat on. But the second part of the Kirkland deal, where it has a very clearly defined process for if there is an ethics accusation as to how that's handled, I think that might be a point of discussion, because I think currently within our rules, I don't really think that exists, and you know, yeah, I think we're missing the boat there. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Mayor Pro Tem Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Agree with all of the above. Councilmember Wiesner hit on the bit that I found most interesting, and that is, you know, because yeah, the state law it already has, we know what the expectation is, but you know, yeah, we kind of flounder when it comes to, well, what if? And so if we ever are in a situation, I did appreciate having, you know, kind of next steps laid out. So I would definitely be interested in exploring that part further. And, you know, and it never hurts to reiterate the expected code of conduct and laws, you know, the things that are in the RCW. It never hurts to kind of reiterate that locally, you know, as a reminder, and it makes it, you know, it's easy to find. So I would probably opt to do it as a resolution or as a standalone, not necessarily a standalone policy, but to kind of tack it on to the council rules and procedures. If we want to implement it for boards and commissions, then, I mean, obviously we can think of a way to do that, but in lieu of actually, you know, codifying it, I would probably prefer to have it as just a resolution or a policy attached to our rules and procedures as opposed to part of the code. And yeah, I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Stuckey.
Yeah, the two things I would like to see, I kind of like what Mayor Pro Tem was talking about, kind of adding that on to council procedures. One thing, though, is boards and commissions, as Wiesner was alluding to. When you join one of those volunteer boards and commission, that doesn't mean you can't be critical of council and council's decisions, but sometimes that spills over to, I'm being specific here, social media, where people are just making personal attacks on there against us. I have seen it from some of our own commissions. That's not something that's good. I mean, it's one thing to be critical. It's another thing to kind of be more lashing out based on decisions made. The second thing is I would really like to see more concrete procedures on when to recuse themselves from votes on the council level. I mean, there is some folks that talk about times where there may be special treatment given or whatnot. Whether or not that's happening or whether or not that's actually perception is up for debate. But it would be nice to have more of a firm, if you have this, you recuse yourself in this. And I know that that is kind of there, you know, through the RCWs, but having it a little more clear would be a lot, you know, I think it would be a better way to go. So I agree, and those are the two things that I would like to see.
Thank you, Councilor Stuckey. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I too would be in support of more along the lines of a resolution, and I like the Vancouver one because it does allow for removal of a board member or someone if, in a violation of a rule. What I had a harder time with the Kirkland one was the ethics officer. It just, I don't know if that would be somebody that's, like our city attorney already, but I certainly wouldn't be in favor of hiring a person just for that position. So, and it sounded like they had quite a bit of responsibility if we were to have that position. So I'd be more in favor of allowing the city attorney to look at it, or however it's spelled out in the Vancouver one, but I'd be more supportive of that than I would the Kirkland.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councilman Stuckey and Councilman Marshall hit on something. We have a hearing examiner, and you probably don't know what they really do, but we used to have some I'll say it wrong. Thank you. And we would have to go one by one. The attorney would ask us, and there are times where I know Councilman Wiesner has excused himself because of something. So technically, the hearing examiner listening to pretty much all of that, it takes that away from us. But if there's something that comes up, I think we are honest enough to say, I think I need to not vote on this, but I will ask for permission to add some comments. But that might be something in a workshop, Mayor, to have the hearing examiner come, or someone at least explain in a nutshell kind of what all they do, just so that we have so many new people that haven't ever gone through the quasi-judicial process. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Munns. Good ideas. Appreciate it. I see Hillary's taking copious notes. You're not writing a new council code, though, I hope. Thank you, Hillary.
If I can just speak back to you what I heard, perhaps I'll come up with an addendum to council rules and procedures that talks about a process for when there's an ethics complaint against a council member for you to review. And then it sounds like I can work with city staff regarding getting you training about recusals, perhaps at a workshop coming up, or a retreat or something in the future. Good.
Yep.
Thank you.
I see several thumbs up. Thank you, Hillary. Appreciate your work always. I'm sorry. Councilor Marshall.
Just to clarify, it sounded to me like the council wanted this to be on all boards and commissions, not necessarily just council. Is that correct? Is that? I believe that's what I heard.
Yes, I think I heard the same thing. And Hillary, I assume you're already involved in, staff is working to do some things regarding all commissions and boards that the city has. And I think you're
Yes,
working on that already.
We're
Okay,
unifying and uniting and coordinating as we speak, so it's good timing.
great. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to take about a 5-minute break, please, and then we'll be back at, 3:40. How's that? 3:40. You get 7 minutes. Yeah.
That's what happens when it's both the same unit numbers of two different apartments. Okay, thank you, Jim.
Okay, I'd like to reconvene the Oak Harbor, City of Oak Harbor Workshop meeting. It's January 25th of 2023. Meeting started at 2 p.m. and it's currently 3:40. I'd like to reconvene the meeting. And we have our section under Fire Department, and the topic is fire engine and QUINT acquisition. We have our Fire Chief Merrill. Welcome, Chief.
Thanks, Mayor. Afternoon, Council. You know what's really nice about this presentation today? You have already approved this money. So I'm not asking for any money. Sandra might be. No, she's not. But, you know, this goes back, as you well remember, to the voters approving the bond and the levy back in November for us to be able to move forward. So now it's time to move forward on what we need to do to get our QUINT purchased and our engine purchased. And some of the stuff I'm going to tell you might surprise you just a little bit. It surprised me when we started doing a little bit of research work, but we're going to see. Stand by. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. So why are we ordering now? We know that North Whidbey went out a little over 2 years ago and ordered a fire engine, and it took over 2 years to get one. Over 2 years. I can remember years ago when you'd order a fire engine, you'd get it within about 6 to 8 months, maybe push it out to a year, maybe. I think you're going to be surprised when you see some numbers in here, how long these things are going to take to get. But it's time to order. And there's a lot of processes we have to go through in order to order the app. Well, that sounded good. In order to order, we have to jump through some hoops to get there. So, you know that we did the general obligation bond, and that was designed to purchase the QUINT. And it's designed to go to the new station. It's going to be on a 12-year bond. $1.2 million is what we anticipated the cost to be. And a QUINT is a combination of an engine and a ladder truck molded together, a 75-foot ladder on top, and then it's got a pump and a water tank. And the intent is so that it can be in that southwest quadrant and be relatively self-sufficient for rescue and firefighting efforts as well as EMS work. Just a design or a schematic of what the QUINT looks like. We've gone out and we've talked to numerous different companies on apparatus, and Sandra's going to speak to this a little bit later on. Right? Okay, I got to check because she's... And we came up with a not-to-exceed price of $1.2 million through a Sourcewell contract purchasing. 780 days from the time that we execute our pre-construction letter. 780 days to get that truck here. And there are some early prepayment discounts available that David's been working on along with Sandra. So this is not a photoshopped picture, actually. It kind of looks like it. Some of you remember the day that the ladder truck failed, and you all authorized us to get this repaired, and that's what that ladder truck looked like on the back of that trailer before it went to Wisconsin. We know that it happened back on February of 2019. You authorized the refurbishment. We know that ladder truck was 30 years old at the time. But in doing the refurbishment for $157,000, we bought another 7 to 10 years out of a 30-year-old ladder truck. And I've got to reiterate that when it got back to Seagraves, they were just totally impressed with the condition that ladder truck was in, and they thought it was a great rig to refurbish. And we bought 7 to 10 years. But you know, someday the day's going to come that we're going to have to buy a new one. And the ladder truck today is going for about $1.7 million. 1.7. We spent $387,000 when we bought that ladder truck back in 1992. We are going to replace the Seagraves engines, the 2 of them. They are 26 years old. They have really come to the end of their lifespan. 46,000 miles on them, a little over 5,300 hours. And we're starting to see some issues start to develop in valves, piping, holes in piping, pipes rotted out, have to do some pump work. We've had to replace seals. We've had some electrical issues, and they're 26 years old. The average lifespan for a fire engine is 20 years. We've pushed 26 years out of ours, and we're still 2 years away, over 2 years away from getting the replacements. So we're going to be pushing 28 to 29-year-old fire engines. Annual lifespan is about 20 years, so, you know, we've got our dollars worth out of them. The levee lid lift allows us to replace one of the sea graves. We anticipated about $750,000 for the replacement of one. A good schematic of what it's going to look like. And it's a not-to-exceed price of $750,000 to replace that engine. 720 days from the day that we execute the ladder, or the contract for the engine. And again, the early prepayment discounts are going to be available for that apparatus. There we go. And gives you an idea what kind of prepayments you can have, and you can see the discounts that's going to be realized on those. Do you want to jump in? Are you ready? And then I'm going to come back because I've got some more. Push the arrow to the right.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. Sandra Place, Central Services Supervisor. I'm going to jump in, as Chief said, here on the discount. We included this slide because we just wanted to show you that there are 4 different options that we could take advantage of. But what we would like to propose to City Council and what we will be proposing is the 25% prepayment based on a couple of different reasons. One, David Goldman has ran some numbers, and we really feel that the 25% is the way to go with the 2.75% savings. If we went with some other options, it might have been cheaper for us to go a different direction and not take a discount, but do a different funding. And David Goldman can speak to that. And also, the zero down option will lock us into the actual manufacturing lineup, and so we're just afraid that if we don't do something that we might be moved back to the back of the line. I want to specifically thank Chief Merrill and his team there. They put together a technical advisory committee, which is super important for procurement. We don't know all of the details of what the operators want and need, and so they did all of the specifications, and I believe some of them were, I think this was their first time as well, and so that it was a learning process for them, but they also brought it to the entire department, because I think what's most important is that we have all the operators given us their information and what they feel, and we have that teamwork of knowing when they get here that everybody's comfortable with that piece of equipment, especially these ones that are so large. And so a sincere thanks to that technical committee for doing that. So then we jump into the procurement process, and as Chief Merrill said, there is a contract that we would like to take advantage of. You've heard this several times from me, Sourcewell, and it used to be Omnia contracts, and so it's a national buying power. It also saves us time and money because we're not doing the formal bid process, and so we're benefiting from discounts based on national pricing. And there's a current contract right now for emergency vehicles, fire trucks, and equipment, and that's the one that we would like to use. The vendor is Cascade Fire and Safety. They actually represent both E1 and KME, and we're proposing to stick with E1 for a variety of reasons. It standardizes our fleet. Our other engines are also E1s. Improved maintenance efficiency, because our mechanics have already worked on the E1, so it will be easier for them for these other ones. We won't need any additional diagnostic tools. They've already been trained. And for the operators, it increases the efficiency and safety because it's the same look and feel, and that's super important for operators. So our next steps is that the Technical Advisory Committee has a few minor changes that they're going to put back to Cascade Fire and Safety. They're going to revise the technical specifications, and we're told that we've been quoted an amount, but that amount will change once they get through the pre-construction meeting if there's anything that was missed or needs to be revamped. So the technical specifications will be changed. We would like to bring this back to City Council on February 21st for potential approval. And if we get your approval, then we are going to begin the pre-construction meeting, which will take about 45 days. And once that 45 days is done and everybody's satisfied, then the delivery time frame begins. So we're still even another 2 months out from one of them was 2 years, 2 months, and the other one was a 2-year delivery date. And we will open it up, unless Chief Mayor would like to say anything else, we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank
nice,
you.
Good report. Thank you, Chief. Turn to council for any questions. 780 days.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Is that 2 times 360?
It's 2
It's
years
not
and 2
quite-
months,
Ah, wow.
just about there, yeah.
Yeah, that's a long wait, isn't it? Okay, anyone got any questions, input? Oh, yes, Councilor Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, just a quick question. We're replacing 2 of the Seagrave engines with 1 engine, and then, so that 1 will stay at the current station, and then the Quint will go to the new station? Is that correct?
So the Quint and the engine will replace the 2 existing engines. One is considered a new purchase because we've never had a Quint before. And then we haven't fully decided if the Quint and both the engine and the Quint are going to go to the new station, or the new engine's going to stay at the existing station. One of the backup engines is going to go over to the new station, as well as the Quint. The Quint is definitely going over to the west side. That's an absolute.
Okay, Councilor Evans.
Hey, Chief, what are we going to do with the replaced equipment?
They will be surplused and sold.
Thank you.
And I should clarify that, if we can find a buyer to buy a 28-year-old fire engine. So, you could have one for your house.
I think he's already spoken.
Okay.
Sounds like Councilor Stuckey's got an inside. Okay. Anyone else? Input, questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, Sandra, thank you. We will move on to our next item, and that falls under City Council, and it is Creative Arts Utility Tax Revenue Discussion. And I think for that, we have we have both our Finance Director, David Goldman, our Arts Commission Liaison, Gideon Kaufman, and our City Administrator, Blaine Oborn. So I'm not sure. Yes, Mr. Hoffmeyer.
I'd like to make a motion to accept public comment on this item.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to accept public comment on this item. Should they wish to do so? Any questions, input? Seeing none, all in favor signify by raising your right hand. Okay, that passes unanimously. Great. Then let's move on to the discussion. Mr. Oborn, I'm not sure who's first. I'm turned to you now.
I will do the introduction here, Mayor. Just to reiterate, this is a council-driven item, so you asked to be on the council. We're going to give our great overview here of kind of how the funding works and what the options are, and then some great over from our finance director, and then we'll go to our archaeologist, Gideon Kaufman, and he'll give, along with Brian Smith and some other staff, I think, our city engineer may chime in too here, Mr. Warren and Alex Warren. Yeah, I'm all of a sudden my tongue tied here. Alex, who are you? Warner. So thank you, Warner here. So and then hopefully my tongue will untie and I'll kind of give a wrap up here. And then whenever council wants to do the public comments, certainly you're welcome to do that.
Who's starting it off then?
So we'll start with our finance director, David Goldman. He'll turn it over to our archaeologist, Gideon Kaufman, and then I'll do the concluding.
Okay. Mr. Goldman.
All right. Okay, thank you, Mayor Blaine, City Council, David Goldman, Finance Director. This is an overview of the utility tax funding source that is used to fund creative arts. So at the City Council meeting on November 15th, 2022, following the public hearing for the 2023-24 preliminary budget, the council passed a motion to place a conversation of funding for the creative arts on a future agenda. So this item is that conversation. So per section 3.71.130 of the Oak Harbor Municipal Code, 0.25% of the utility tax collected on each supplier of water, sewer, and solid waste services goes to fund creative arts, and it's deposited in the Creative Arts Fund. As you're aware, those three sources have a total utility tax of 6.25%. So that 1/4% of the 6.25% goes to fund creative arts. And there's 5 goals in the Oak Harbor Municipal Code regarding creative arts. You can see it right there in the screen. It's to foster arts and cultural programs for the enrichment of the city and its citizens, to foster the development of a local arts community, to coordinate and strengthen new and existing art organizations, and develop cooperation with regional agencies and entities, to develop a program for public art, and to further the vision of Oak Harbor as a vibrant and progressive community. So we looked through state requirements for art funding, and we couldn't find any requirements that cities must fund public arts. We did find some requirements that apply to certain state agencies, and in addition, voters may approve an additional property or sales tax to expand access to nonprofit cultural organizations. So before you is the history of the creative arts revenues from those utility taxes that I was talking about before. Went back about 5 years, and the bottom row is 2022. The year has not been finalized yet. We're still, doing all the reconciliations and working on the books for 2022. But those are the preliminary numbers that we have. So you'll see that the city water column is on your left. The city sewer column is in the second row over from the left. And then you have the city solid waste. And then you have the tax that's on the island disposal portion of solid waste. That's mostly for dumpster rentals. But the total is all the way on the right side, and you can see that it's grown over time from about $49,500 to about $55,500. So far this year, that number is likely to grow a little bit as we continue to reconcile and book revenues for 2022. So the average impact of this 1/4% utility tax is about 57 cents per month for the average residential customer, which equates to about $6.84 annually. According to state law, there is no maximum that can be charged for utility tax rate for water, sewer, solid waste, and stormwater utilities. This is the fund balance chart that's also found in the adopted budget. You can see that the beginning of 2023, we're estimating that the unencumbered fund balance is $277,000, and that looks like it will grow to $360,000 by the end of the biennial, at the end of 24. Now that it does take into account projected revenues and projected operating and maintenance expenses, but it doesn't take into account any specific expenses that'll be needed for art projects that have come before the city council in the past. And by the way, those projects will be the topic that Gideon and Brian will be going over on their slide deck right after this presentation. So we put together some potential options for the city council to consider. One is no change. 2 is to perhaps reallocate that 1/4% to the general fund instead of it going directly into the creative arts fund, and then have the council approve transfers from general fund to creative arts as needed during the year. Option 3 would be just to reduce those taxes from 6.25% down to 6% for those 3 utilities. Or option 4 might be other options that we just happen not to have thought of. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Gideon and Brian to talk about some projects and funding needs for these particular projects for the next year or two.
Welcome, Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Council. Does the clicker work? All right. Thanks, Tim. All right, so update on projects. As all of you know, the Acorn was successfully installed, located in Southeast Pioneer between Wells Fargo and People's Bank. Installation cost, $12,331.58. However, there are some next steps. So we need a shelter. The shelter will also contain leaflets from the Gary Oak Society, as well as Easter eggs of the carving itself, as well as ribbon cutting. The remaining allocations around $8,000. That's definitely not going to cover the cost of the shelter, but will cover the cost of the design of it. Temple Blue. So this is part of the Joseph Kinnebrew collection, which is what you'll be getting for the rest of this presentation. The location was approved, and that's the Pocket Park over on SR 20 and Coochie Street. There are some minor repairs, and I'll go through those. Superior Systems cost estimate was $2,500 for that. We had Alpine Engineering do a design for the installation. That cost $1,200. P&L is going to be doing the installation. Their cost estimate is around $10,974.83. That's going to be a concrete pour. You let the concrete cure for a couple of weeks, and then you drill holes into the concrete. You fill it with a polymer, and then you use quick bolts and put the quick bolts in and basically bolt the sculpture to the concrete. There's additional signage costs. That's going to be around 10 grand for the signs that are kind of about this size that are installed in concrete. The approved allocation was $25,000 for this. Here's some photographs showing some minor dents on the right-hand side. I believe that occurred through moving. And then these pinholes, and these pinholes are along the welds. And we have to be careful with those because water gets in there, and then you have rust and corrosion, and then the weld fails. All right, meditation. This was one that the Arts Commission had wanted to maybe scrap, and then we got it repainted, and everybody got really excited about it. It was painted by a local body shop here in town, and is currently stored at Public Works. The approved location is at the Boys and Girls Club on Ely and Whidbey Ave. So again, and I'll go over some of the damages. Superior Systems, cost estimate is $980 to do an inspection, repair some of the cracked welds, and add angle tabs to the base. So that way we could put in the quick bolts and we could actually install it. Alpine Engineering did the design. It cost $1,200. For P&L to do the installation, they gave us a cost estimate of $4,410. Okay, so this shows some of the damage. So this is that center slide there is the top cylinder. And as you can see, it's just very corroded, and we want to just get that secure. This picture shows those pinholes, kind of just like Temple Blue, that need to get repaired. And this shows the lack of tabs. So just imagine tabs there for the bolts to go through. Gate of Inspiration. This is currently being stored behind Public Works, away from the water. As I've found out that it's a permitting nightmare when you're close to the water, both in cost and just the amount of time it takes. The repairs from Superior Systems, it's $2,500. That's to inspect the surfaces, repair some cracked welds, and cut out and replace some dented sections. I believe next, there we go. So it's really tough to see. And this one's in actually pretty good shape because it had been powder coated. It's a brown, black powder coating. But as you can see, there's only one tab there. There should probably be 12, 4 on each base. The pools of water, those are the steel areas that need to be replaced. And again, I don't know what caused that damage. 3 totems. Again, this was being stored at our Public Works campus. The proposed location is Centennial Grove. Everybody loves that location. The thought is to sandblast the whole thing and just let it erode out at Centennial Grove, which would cost a minimal amount. Repair some Superior Systems, $1,380. That's inspect the surface, repair cracked welds, and sandblast to repairs. I'm guessing it could be done for significantly less than that. Again, kind of gives you a picture of 3 totems. It's a little too complex to paint unless you want to like blast it all one color. And your favorite, Angel de la Creatividad. Our current Public Works Director, Steve Schuler, is taking lead on this project. And may the odds be ever in his favor. Revise the PSA with Sculpture Northwest is pending. So the choice is the current location at Windjammer or Flintstone Park. Will incur additional expenses. I'm guessing that means the city will. And updates to the Arts Commission and City Council are forthcoming. I believe our plan is to present at the March Council workshop. All right. No, I'm still on. Creative Arts Fund and Budget. So we've developed a budget for art and project management, having somebody from Washington Arts Commission come in and help guide this committee a little bit. We allocated $7,000 a year. Discretionary, $1,500. There was just all of this low-hanging fruit that could easily get done. $5,000 a year to Oak Harbor School District. You know, I was watching you folks and saying we could donate more to that, and I wholeheartedly agree. But right now they're getting nothing. Just like our Parks Department. So it's the same amount, $5,000 for parks to do repairs and operations and maintenance. To have a table of Music Fest is $300, and Driftwood Days, $1,500 each year. All right, that's it.
All right, I'll kind of wrap it up here. I appreciate the presentations. Our finance director covered the kind of the expenses and where we are in the revenue wise, and then upcoming items was coming and Gideon and kind of Gideon Kaufman, and kind of to summarize his point here. In the next 2 years, we budgeted $40,600 is programmed. That's what he did on the last slide. In expenses that are estimated upcoming, I calculated it up the actual dollar amounts, and it was about $35,000. But there is a lot of expense that is unknown. If you notice, you talk about it, and I started to try to come up with a top number, and I decided not to go there because whenever I guess things, I'm probably wrong. So we just don't know what the expense there. And then back to reiterate, we don't have a staff position on this because this is a council item that was brought forward. So we're here to answer any questions and help council with their decision on where they want to go from here.
Okay, so this could be an opportunity for someone else in the audience, if you'd like to speak at this point. And I guess you'll have that opportunity again, potentially after council. So, okay, Cynthia Mason, welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cynthia Mason, and I do sit on the Arts Commission with a few other members behind me. I've been on at that table for about, I think it was 2019, Mayor appointed me. So I just want to state how passionate the volunteers are at the table for art in Oak Harbor. We really appreciate Eric's participation with his appointment as liaison, and look forward to what Parks and Rec partnership can hold for the future. I think they work in tandem together. But more importantly, I know that all of you agree that your focus is economic development for Oak Harbor, and I just want to state what an important and critical hub in the wheel of economic development that art is for community. And I just don't think that the funds should be cut. There's a lot of potential there for us to grow and develop and make it exciting here. So thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anyone else? Okay, we'll turn to council. Councilor Wiedner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I'm just going to say right off the bat, art is important, period, right? And what I'm afraid of, and I know some of the suggestions are, doing away with the fund or moving the fund into the general fund and then making expenditures out of it as needed, and I'm just afraid it's going to get lost, right? And it doesn't deserve to be lost. It deserves to be out in the front. I'm just going to say, in my opinion, what needs to happen here is we just need to challenge ourselves and our Arts Commission and our Parks Department. Let's come up with some creative, I don't want to spend the money just to spend it by any means, but I think for the last few years, we haven't focused on other things that are art, right? There's lots of things that can be considered art. Light displays can be considered art. Interactive displays for the children in our community can be considered art. Making sandcastles can be considered art, right? And I think with the new Parks and Recreation Department, heavy on recreation, right? We want to create things in our community like that we used to have, we're relying upon Mr. Smith to bring some of his knowledge from the outside on how to do that. But I think art can be a big part of that, not only in the recreation side of things, but what we do with our parks and our walkways and et cetera. And I know we have to have this discussion, right? There's been some controversy and discussion has to be had. From my standpoint, that's my challenge. That's my challenge to the council. It's a challenge to the Arts Commission, who I appreciate your volunteerism greatly. It's our challenge to our new Parks Director, our challenge to our city administrator, right? Let's figure out a way to use these funds that are going to benefit the most people in the city as possible. And for me, a lot of that is the kids in our community, right? Because exposing the children in our community to art, whether it be a hands-on interactive display, whether it be a light show in part of our town, whether it be a summer camp with art, whether it be an after-school program with art in conjunction with the school district. Let's start work together. Let's think outside the box, right? And let's come up with a plan moving forward to keep art in our community. But let's make it so it's going to, everybody's going to see the benefit of it. And that's not to say that we don't benefit from what we've got. I hear people say, oh, the oak leaves up by the school, that's terrible. Well, every time I drive past that at night and I see it lit up, I think that's really cool. And it is going to be subjective. And the fact that we're actually even conversing is actually good, right? Because that's part of what art's supposed to do. It's supposed to create conversation, right? And so that's my 2 cents on it. I want to lay it out as a challenge, and certainly be interesting to hear what the rest of the council thinks. And I know some folks feel as though this is something we need to do away with altogether, but that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Councilor Wiedner, thank you. Let me see. I'm going to stay on this side. One more, Councilor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the reason that I brought this up to get on the agenda in the first place is, I've received comments from our constituents of who we represent about why we're spending this much money into the arts fund when we don't have many things coming out of it. I watch your art commission meetings, and things like the Dixie cups and the fence, those, they're cute, but the thing that really captures me, and most of you know, I'm not a art person, but I enjoy it. When I drive down Pioneer and I see the ducks and the mermaids and the kraken, and people go out and decorate those. We don't know who does it, but people leave it alone. They respect it. They appreciate it. It's part of the community. That's the kind of art that I would like to see. I do also agree with your comments. You know, getting the kids involved, having programs, things of that nature. But just to continue to pump money into the fund when we're really not seeing the results is the challenge for me, because I have to speak to my constituents who voted to put us here. So I will second that challenge to everybody. I mean, we need to step up and do things that are conducive for the entire community. Yes, art can be a discussion piece, but it sure shouldn't be something that tears a community apart. But this is a conversation that, like Councilmember Wiesner said, it has to be had. It's also very telling when one of your own commission members makes a public comment that was made before I made my comment, and I've not spoken to her about it, that she's got concerns about the way that the Art Commission is operating and the funding for it. So this is a conversation that we need to have. We need to take it seriously, and we need to look at options. I do not want art to go away. I think art is very important to our community. It's important to every community. But right now, I just don't think that we're going in the direction that we should be. So option 2 does look appealing to me, because any of the funds that are going to be spent are going to be approved by council anyways. But that would keep the funds in the general fund for other uses while we're in the process. And I do appreciate all of the time that you guys put in. I appreciate you volunteering. I know that that is a big time out of your schedule, but we got to get something that's going to benefit the community out of it. Thank you.
This side, and I'll go to Councilor Stuckey.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this conversation has been a little time coming. I don't think it's a secret that there's some friction between the Arts Commission and council, especially the newer council members, and we need to move on from that. I mean, if there's anything I've done to fuel that flame, I apologize. We need to work as one team, not taking shots at each other, either here or social media or however. So in anticipation for this, I made sure to get as much feedback as possible through various sources, talking to people, the phone. I even paid for some Facebook ads to get other opinions. So it wasn't my opinion, but a collaboration, because our job is to represent and try to translate what the public wants. 2 things stood out very prominently to me. I asked the question, what should we do with the arts budget? There were a few that said, slash it. To be honest, those are the few that would probably say slash any budget and are kind of against government spending. But the vast majority of people do want the arts budget to continue. And that was very apparent. I mean, there is a small minority who doesn't, but the most seem to be okay with the way it was. The other thing, which can be a little difficult to hear, is almost unanimously, those that were for keeping the budget are not happy with the art coming through the pipe. If you look at the art that's coming down, it's almost all sculptures and abstract sculptures. That was clear that that is not what the public wants. There are some, but when each one of those sculptures goes up, I can almost guarantee you, if the Whitby News Times picks it up, there's an article, there will be backlash to having one more abstract sculpture. I mean, if you look even on my social media that I have, I mean, tons of ideas, 60 comments worth, giant outdoor instruments you can play, a water fountain with color-changing lights, music classes for children. And if we do stationary art, where you look at, have some level of interaction. I mean, one thing, a Dutch shoe and tulips. I know we beat the Dutch thing quite a bit, but something you could sit in and take photo ops. Another thing we can do, I know it's just a dirty word almost, but you could do a survey done by the Arts Commission. And I'm not saying a survey saying, should we slash it? Should we not have art? I'm not suggesting that. A survey, what kind of art do you want to see? Not specific, do you want this piece? Do you want interactive art? Do you want to see more classes for children? Do you want to have more things in playgrounds? And then when you get the results from that survey, we have to do what that survey says. If we put out a survey and don't do what that survey says, it's just not going to work. So for me, judging to what I've heard over and over from people, I'm okay with the art budget being the way it is currently, assuming we move over to more creative art ideas and another sculpture, another thing to look at. If that's the way it continues, I have a feeling in a year or two we'd be back at this conversation, and in that case, I probably would be for pausing the arts budget. But right now, I think we need to let our new people do their work. I think we need to move on from just sculptures and do things for children that are interactive and fun, and see where that takes us in the next year or two. Thank you.
Councillor Hoffmeyer?
Sure. I think a lot of what Councillor Stuckey said there's actually very accurate. The intent has never been, and this never should have been the council versus the Arts Commission, or at least the perception thereof. When you look at downtown Oak Harbor, the moon waves or the stumbly ducklings or the mermaid, that's one of the things you think of when you think of downtown Oak Harbor. Langley, you're certainly going to think of the Georgia Gerber Boy and the Dog, of course. Seattle in front of the Seattle Art Museum. That part of town, you're certainly going to think of the Hammering Man. I did knock on a lot of doors a little over a year ago in my campaign, and I heard very few people say that they were against the arts budget as well. Very, very few people. There is an urge to be heard out there, and however they are given that voice. And I've repeatedly said with the angel sculpture, for instance, I actually heard very few people against that. Even they were against the location. So I don't have a problem with the arts budget. It seems that the majority of the community does want it. Gosh, this would have been about 12 years ago now. The city of Oak Harbor had a piece of art commissioned as Fort Nugent Park was kind of growing into what it is. And there was a stone that I think was carved into a bean sprout, if you will. And you were able to watch that be carved in time lapse, if you will. So whether it's a creative arts budget or maybe it's a cultural arts budget, by things, art that means something to Oak Harbor or is at least an investment in the future. It doesn't take too many reads of the Whidbey News Times to realize there's very little, if nothing, to do for kids in this community. And some of these kids that are getting in the most trouble, maybe they are the ones that struggle the most with the idle hands. And maybe there's future artists in the mix. Maybe there's a way to use some of this budget, a summer camp, a summer art camp, if you will. But I think council and the Arts Commission moving forward, we have to do a better job of communicating with each other and compromising to represent the will of the people. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Eisen.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand the concern where someone might bring up the fact that we haven't seen a lot of art happening recently. There's not a lot coming out of this fund. But, we have to give the Art Commission a little grace on that subject. We are just coming out of a, 2+ year pandemic in which, none of that was spent and no new pieces were commissioned. So it's, I think people understand, the majority of people understand that the city is not in the habit of just letting hundreds of thousands of dollars sit unused in an art budget. This is very much the exception to the rule. And, the annual contribution of $55,000 is not a lot. Especially with our new Parks and Rec department, and, Brian Smith showed us the PowerPoint and pictures of community events and really kind of showed us what was possible. And I think having $300,000+ sitting in the Creative Arts Fund is not a problem. I think it's an opportunity. It's a great opportunity to use as seed money for events and community programs that could eventually become self-sufficient, self-sustaining, but that need an initial investment to get off the ground. So, yeah, I think it's actually a great opportunity, the fact that that is sitting there, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what can be done with the Arts and Parks and Parks and Rec collaboration. I think that there's a lot of potential there. What I'm curious about is, we've already heard a number of great ideas, and I'm curious as to how would a community member or a council member best present an idea or a suggestion to the Arts Commission? What would that look like? Would they come to a meeting and make a comment? Can they email one of you, all of the above? Could they email us and we forward that on? Like, what would that kind of input look like to you, ideally? Oh, sure.
Councilor Marshall.
Thank you. We have a public comment period, and all the council or all the commissioners can be emailed. I'll be happy to take the idea to the Arts Commission as well.
Okay.
So yeah, all of the above. Essentially, is the short answer. Yes.
Great. Yeah, there's lots of great ideas. I've heard lots of ideas. I have a few of my own, so I will pass those along to you to pass along to the commission. Thank you, and thank you for your work. It's probably one of the most thankless commission jobs in the city, and you are very passionate and hardworking, and we really appreciate it.
Councilor Munns.
Thank you. I talk in circles, so just hang in there. I am K through 12 art ed, and the reason I got into it is mainly younger children, but even high school students, they have a hard time getting confidence. And you can look at a piece of art that the child is, and there's colors everywhere, nothing's in the line, but you can honestly say, and they'll know if you're not being honest, like, wow, look at the choices of it. But if you start to build up confidence in a child, or even a near adult child, a teenager, it starts to go over. In math, it's either right or it's wrong. But in art, there's a vision to it and you can gain from it. So we've got to keep the art. I do not want to move the budget because I'm sorry it'll get lost. I can remember the senior center when it was getting started and they made money and the city said, well, we'll hold it for you. Well, they went to use it and the city goes, oh, I don't know where that money is. No, we can't lose that budget. Basically, the amount is not even the price of a fancy latte with whipped cream and an extra shot. So I don't think that what we charge, what is in, is not over exuberant, and that if we switched it to let it lapse or something, I mean, the $300,000, you come up with a great idea, and it'll be gone in a second. We have a lot of art we've had, but we haven't been able to repair it or had a selection site. I too feel like I don't want sculptures everywhere. I would like to see out of the box some ideas of what can be done on it. I didn't see in the budget, Gideon, the amount that you're kind of predicting for maintenance, but maybe it went over my head, or in one eye and out the other. Oh, 5,000, okay. So I think that is important for people to know, is when we establish a piece and it is set, that we do have inspections on it and we're making sure that it's good and it's kept nice. If you let a piece of art start to deteriorate, then everybody's kind of against it. It is fun to see the stumbling ducks with the backpacks, or the maiden has a Christmas wreath still, and it's a mystery on that. But I can remember when Mayor Slowick was fighting to keep the stumbling ducks. People didn't want it. It's stupid, it's silly, it's childish, but there you go, it's conversation. And sometimes we don't talk to other people, but it opens up. So I think we need to keep the fun going. Now that we're actually placing some, I think the kind of whimsical, abstract, bright colors at the Boys and Girls Center is perfect. And it's something that they can touch, but I also would like to see some of the out-of-the-box ideas. I mean, we can't take over a complete resurrect. recreation program, but the Arts Commission could maybe have an artist that opens a workshop, either to adults or to kids, that make flame a new interest or something. I mean, there's other ways. Even music is part of the arts. And I can remember when Oak Harbor in the elementary took away art and music for a short time. And it's just, we can't let it go, but we can re-look at it and see the possibilities. I also want to say I have confidence in the Art Commission. We have confidence in the Marina Advisory Committee. We have confidence in our other boards. They are selected, they are volunteers, various backgrounds, which is good. But we need to seriously look at what they're bringing to us, because we don't have time to look at art pieces or children's programs, or our new Parks and Rec person has come in with ideas from where he's been. That's an advantage, in, I think, some ways of being in a Navy town. A lot of people come in and out and they can say, oh, I saw this, this was good. So I think we need to give them the respect that they're making suggestions to us. And let's see, there's one other. One of the things, I'm sure the Art Commission was involved, the wraparounds at the Splash Park. Remember, we had a contest, and the kids, and I'm not sure if it was done through the arts or Public Works, but that was a great project, and the kids took such pride. And we even, I believe, got the wraps made, what, for free? I mean, somebody got so enthusiastic about it, someone, a business in town, like donated, or a lot of them, just so they could get done on time for the opening. So I think you'll see that we're all open to other ideas. Consensus seems to be we don't want a sculpture on every corner. But I think people do come to town and they take pride. There's hardly any litter or stuff, and the downtown sculptures have not been vandalized. And they take pride, and then you see little whimsical things happen with it. And I think this relates. I was afraid that the ball, I'm not sure what it was called, in Windjammer, so kids could climb on it. We wanted to be sure the surface was kind of anti spray paint, and fortunately it hasn't. But I mean, there's a lot of things, so please keep going, bringing ideas, but let's keep this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mons. Councilor Stuckey?
This is a question, and if there's not an answer, then I guess it's a suggestion. So this might be for Gideon and Brian. Is there a plan in place, or again, if not, a suggestion, to actively solicit ideas and feedback? I don't think it's too difficult to realize if you say, here's our email address, you can come to a meeting, you're not going to get much. I mean, we beg for people to come to meetings. It's not going to happen. Even so much as sending an email, people just like to go on social media and say things as opposed to take that one extra step to send an email. Is there any plan, or can there be a plan? And I'm throwing out a survey just as an idea. I mean, it'd be the right one. Is there a plan to actively solicit ideas from the community as opposed to, here's a meeting, show up if you got something?
So,
workshops are conversations, right? So thank you for letting me stand up here again. What we plan to do as a group is empower ourselves to come up with those processes. We were looking to the city staff to provide us with those, and that delivery has fallen short, and that is not a criticism. It's us recognizing we don't have a staff member appointed to help us through processes. Our relationships with Parks and Rec might develop that role, and in conversation about ideas, we have over 100 ideas, literally, that we could share with you. How we're going to rank those and all of that is starting to roll out now that we're trying to get some structure, and I hope I can bring some of that with my background to the table. Where am I going with this? I mean, we even thought about with our budget to help pay for staff if we need to. I mean, do we need a part-time staff person, and can we take that from the budget and allocate it to help? We recognize the city runs on a very efficient and tight budget. So if we can help the process or procedures that we come up with, the follow through of it on the other end with the Gideon doing the work on the Kennebrew installations while he's trying to do his full-time job as archaeologist, I think is challenging. So we really appreciate Gideon for everything he's done for us. But I have empowered my cohorts to, as Tara said, I see this as an opportunity. It's not there, so we get to create who we are and obviously bring that to you. So there is not, but there will be, is the answer to your question.
So, Mr. Smith, I'm going to hold you off for just a moment. I want to apologize to Mr. Marshall. You had your hand up, and I didn't call on you, and I called on another counselor twice. Or do you? Okay, Mr. Smith, come ahead.
Well, I'm just going to reinforce those comments, right? So we have a really, like you mentioned, a really passionate commission. I think they have a lot of great ideas. You also have a public that are bursting with ideas and a desire to see all forms of both public art, visual, as well as performing arts and things like that. So, and you know, I just came off fresh from 5 years of, we just had established a new art and cultural events commission for Glenwood Springs. We just went through a public art master plan. So I have all that stuff for templates and processes on how to do that. We'd like to put together a web page for our department page that has call for artist process, has inventory of our current art, set up an art walk through some of our more heavily art district type areas, look at art districts, and then have processes for people to make suggestions of, hey, what do you think of this? You know, because we love those ideas from the community, and I love all the ideas that you have given us tonight. So yeah, those processes are definitely coming, and hopefully, I mean, that's part of the reason why we've put this department together, is I think to fill in some of those gaps and help provide that support and resources for these commissions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Council, any more? Anybody? Okay, Councilor Marshall.
Might as well. Yeah, might as well. That's right. Gideon, I have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind. I wrote this down. Meditation, why was it painted before it was repaired? Good enough answer. In Temple Blue, we have dents that were presumably made in the moving of it. How are we going to prevent that from happening when we go to install it? And if it does happen, is there something in place with P&L that they're going to repair it? Okay. Just as the newest member of the Arts Commission, I did have some concerns when I first got on there, and I shared it with the commissioners that asked me to join. One of the things I would like to see is what Mr. Smith brought up, is that a public art master plan, some kind of a general idea of what we're going to do as a whole. Because as an outsider, prior to me being on councils, is I saw that a lot of sculptures, you know, and we had the Kennebrew collection. We've had it for years, and it's just been kind of sitting there. And so as an outsider, that's what I've seen is sculptures and outside artists, not necessarily so much local artists. Having now spent some time with the Arts Commission, is a very passionate group, and they have some great ideas, and I'm encouraged by the direction that it's going, and will continue to go, especially with your help, Gideon, and Mr. Smith and Alex. And so I would be comfortable keeping the funds as they are, but I do have some concerns about stacking up a balance. You know, I would like to see that balance come down a little bit. I'd love to see us really kind of identify these 5 goals of the Arts Commission, and that one of them, foster arts and cultural programs. if we could provide seed money for some of these new things, whether it be a music festival or an art show or something where we're helping to kind of get these, and I think it was Mayor Pro Tem that brought that up, is providing kind of some seed money to get some of these things started. I think that'd be a great use of our funds and a great way to help to continue to foster the arts. And as I encouraged the commission before, is economic development type of art. If we could do things that are going to obviously bring people into our community. We know the music festival does that. And then kids, the more we can involve kids, the more it's going to win in our community. We're going to have, the parents are going to be all supportive of that. The kids are going to be supportive, but that's a win-win for our community. So I thank you all for your time and your efforts on the Arts Commission and Gideon for your time and staff. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Marshall. Gideon, okay, thank you. Okay.
Hi, Mary Himes in the Arts Commission. So I am, I think, the newest, maybe second to the newest on the commission. So I came from outside of Oak Harbor and with my own ideas, or maybe none at all. I am not a sculptor. I don't paint. I don't know how to make lines straight. I write. I'm a writer, and as in the presentation that I did last year about this community, coming together and doing things for each other and being there for each other. The tone in the council today is very encouraging as far as what can happen in this community with art. As Mr. Hoffmeyer spoke on, the community that struck me as far as the youth, there is a lot of art in these children. You can tell by the way they color their hair, different colors, mismatch their shoes, do opposing things because there's nothing for them to do. There's no outlet for that artistic space in them. We don't have a lot of graffiti around town, which means they're respectful. But we do have a lot of things happening in the youthful areas that people don't really want to talk about, or that they're not one-offs. It's starting to build and it's starting to grow. I come from an urban place, and there are urban issues here that are not because they were brought here. This is boredom, this is youth, this is no outlet. On the other side of that, Oak Harbor is a creative space. No matter if it's not Langley and it's not the South End. I have a little job in Anacortes, and I just happened to be working in a restaurant. And I met two people from Oak Harbor, Miss Howley, Patricia Howley, and another with her older student, I think his name's Foster. They're both writers. They both have books. He's a professor at UCLA. Those are just two people that I randomly met that I never knew who they were and didn't know that they were from Oak Harbor. There are artists in the world that are from Oak Harbor and Whidbey Island. They make a difference. They make a difference, but they don't come back because there's nothing maybe to come back to. But there were teachers here that helped them believe in themselves to be able to do more. Like you said about knowing that there's some outlet. I was the kid with the crayon and I didn't know what to do with the crayon and I was angry and I just scribbled. That's all I did. But it was an outlet. But along the way that turned into writing and I love the words. Taking back the budget and sitting it and making it pretty and saying that maybe we're going to grow some flowers and we're going to make some trees. There is no action in that. What I saw in our last meeting with the council is that we are about some action at this point. We realize that there has been no action in a way where it is, one, what do we present to the council and how do we present that? There has been a gap in that communication, and I think that that gap will be closing very quickly. I think that we have taken the steps and are taking steps to solidify our processes inside of our meetings that will be more conducive to getting to the point, making plans that are not just plans on paper, but action. So I just wanted to say that these things are important. We're not all sculptors, but we are about our community, and it does make a difference. And Oak Harbor's art and artistic pieces do make a difference with the rest of the community, the rest of our country, and the rest of the world. We make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Anyone else? A very nice discussion. I too want to thank our volunteers on the commission. I know that it's not easy, but I think we've had a great conversation here today. I'm not sure how many of you were on the commission at the time the Kraken was put downtown, but I can tell you that I was on the city council. I was not the mayor, and that brought a great amount of conversation. And now we've got a professional hockey team called the Kraken. So where'd they get their idea? Anyway, thank you very much, our commissioners. Thank you, Gideon. I know it's not easy. You do a lot of additional work for the city, and you're kind of doing this on a part-time gig, but we really appreciate your time and efforts, and the rest of staff, the support. I'm excited about Brian and the addition of Brian to help us out here too. So thank you very much. We'll move on to our last item, and you've got about 2 minutes, Mr. City Administrator. No, I'll give you 5, I guess. Mr. Oborn for under administration, the city administrator's report.
All right, quick highlights here. One of the first items on my page there, second item, great coordination with the Oak Harbor School District and city staff regarding some potentials there for athletic fields and transportation facilities. So more to come on that, and 2 council members are going to serve on kind of a meeting that we're going to have upcoming with the 2 people on the council boards with staff and looking at opportunities and vetting things, options a little bit more there. So moving on to the next idea, we had our November all-hands meeting, and we had a lot of great ideas, bright ideas we called them, and so we're working on and kind of integrating that into our program there with staff, so a lot of good progress there. Moving on, under economic development, exciting, it's been talked about a lot, but I think we continue to talk about the opportunity there with the purchase of 1081 and 1091 Southeast Pioneer Way. Certainly has an art piece on it. That building may come down, but we'll have to look at other alternatives there. Certainly in the short run, we'll continue to make sure that that property is open and available for special events. I think that's a positive direction there because there's been some worry about that. And then look at the evaluating demolishing of the 2 buildings, and then not talked about under grants, but certainly it's an upcoming item that we're working for is securing grants for environmental monitoring and cleanup that we know that's going to be coming with that property, and then also with economic development, so we can come up with a redevelopment plan for that property there. So under the current economic development, our economic development coordinator provided 18 points there of areas that he's working on, so certainly input's welcome on that, and we'll kind of follow the format of the grants specialist there and doing quarterly reports. That's worked really well, and then we'll look at other opportunities, and I think certainly he'll be appearing before the council many times in the future, and he had to go to another meeting, and we're working on the airport issue on economic development, and it was going on at the same time, so I appreciate having multiple staff to kind of accommodate that. Certainly finance, great exit interview today, and to commend staff for their efforts there. Human resources, we have some positions open: capital projects manager, a park specialist, 1 or 2, and then police officers. And then I missed the January 19th, 30,000 coho salmon coming. I was able to see it last year. Certainly it's an opportunity, and it's a great program here, and a great demonstration of the marina. One of the things we're doing there is switching their software there to DocWa, so some opportunity there. And then certainly in the parks, progress there that council really wanted to see was the Portland News installation, so I appreciate the effort there and getting that done. And I don't think it's quite done yet. Is the fence down yet? I don't think quite, but it's coming along really close to being completed there, shrubbery coming in, so great progress there and great coordination there. So that includes my comments, open to any questions or concerns.
Any questions from council? At this point, yes, Councilor Wiesner.
I just have a comment about the 1091 building, and you get it, you know, that gas station. I think it can be something. You know, I'd like us to, you know, as we're evaluating that, to evaluate it not only from the standpoint of tearing it down, but evaluate it from what can we do to save it. You know, it's an Art Deco building in our downtown. You know, you know, it's just got a great look to it, and I would like to see us make sure that we have our eyes open when we're looking at that as the potential of what can we do. Maybe even a public-private partnership, or even a partnership with Main Street, where Main Street right now is currently paying rent for offices. Maybe that money could be deferred to doing some repairs on that building, and we could supply that building to them as an office space. I just want to make sure we're thinking outside the box on that one.
Yeah, we got the other building demoed, you know, I don't think there's any question on that one.
Yeah,
but-
the flat roof building has no historical significance or anything, but, you know, that service station downtown with those rounded curves, I think the Arts Commission would agree with me. That could be a piece of art, and that could certainly be something that, you know, can springboard other things on that parcel if we can figure out a way to creatively save it.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's an interesting conversation, Mr. Olborn. I think you and I had one along that same line.
Yep.
Didn't we? Okay, good. Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
First of all, Blaine, thanks for everything you do. Secondly, you know, I think along the lines of what Councilor Wiesner was saying, if it were to make sense, I mean, those old service stations, whether it be Woodby Coffee across the road or whether it be the Jimmy John's in Anacortes, I mean, they are savable, and you know, maybe there would be some option to let that go into private hands under certain stipulations, such as a public restroom being included, accessible from the outside of the building or something. I think there's some things that other cities have done in the past that work, and yeah, it's worth looking into.
Yeah, thank you. I think if we do, our Brownsville grant may come on that, so we'll kind of evaluate that, and so we'll kind of, our Public Works Director is taking the lead on that, and so certainly we'll convey that to him tomorrow, and he's probably listening now too. So we'll continue to evaluate that and move ahead, and we'll be coming to council for more kind of status on that.
Okay, any other business? Seeing no other business at this time, I will call this